live and up front, and Mountain Man Mark.
Hello.
We're back again for the second part of Detox Your Whole Life, the 8 essential principles of healthy living. And in this series, we're talking about how addictions actually affect your whole life. And we're going to just recap from last week what we talked about in terms of first do no harm and how that can affect you in your life before anything positive or negative can happen. But before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment and give gratitude for this time that we're living in. And I know yesterday was a holiday for people in the United States and North Americans. I think in Canada it was a few weeks ago for Thanksgiving. But I want to take a moment and give gratitude to our native ancestors who actually were here and were great stewards on the planet, and who Mark and I greatly appreciate the ways that they've shown us that we can appreciate Mother Earth and allow her to be a guidance system, and also a very nurturing physician in many ways between the herbs and the foods that she supplies. So I want to take a moment and thank our Native American ancestors and for their part in this process. So we'll get started with, I'll let Mountain Man Mark recap a little bit from last week, what we talked about.
Okay, what I remember talking about was the extreme importance of shifting your mindset from one of dependency, which is fear-based, dependency upon the medical system and the pharmaceutical industry for your health. Most people, the great majority of people, if they get ill, they think they're a victim of fate and they have to go to doctors and then get prescribed medicine or surgery. If you can shift that thinking into one of just belief in common sense by observing the human body, your body, looking at what it does on a daily basis. My own personal experience, I'm a little clumsier than most people. So on a weekly basis, at least, I have a cut, a scratch, some little thing that the body's got to heal, and I observe
Usually
it.
cuts.
Yes, a lot of cuts, a lot of cuts. And I'm just amazed at how quickly, I just, the day that we did our last thing here, I had cut my finger down to the bone with a machete, and then just put a piece of masking tape on it to pull it together. In a few days, it's fine.
I wouldn't recommend masking tape.
Okay.
He's really Mountain Man Mark.
But the point is, no matter what happens to the body, all that healing takes place within. The doctor sets the bone, he sews you up, he may even open you up and put another heart in, part of a heart. But the reality is that healing is taking place in the body. What the doctor did would amount to almost nothing if the body didn't do its miracle. So it's healing and regenerating and rejuvenating on a daily basis. So that was one of the main points.
One of the reasons that we are sharing this information with those who are interested in being responsible for their own health to the best of their ability is because we've had the experience of knowing the innate intelligence of the body's ability to heal itself if we get out of harm's way. And so the main point of these series of essential principles is to help you to start thinking about the different ways that you can actually be responsible for your health. And as we said before, there are times when you need medical intervention. And what we're speaking about is maintaining your health, creating more health and more vitality. And one of the messages that was downloaded to me was life begets life. And so we'll be speaking a lot about what you can do to inundate more life in your body and in your mind and your spirit. And a lot of these principles will help you do that. And also, in terms of addictions, we found that when you start to depend on something outside of your own innate intelligence and outside of your body, you become less alive, you become less creative, you become disconnected. And so that is the whole point of this series about addictions. It's not, we're not talking about, oh, you have this bad habit or we have this bad habit. I don't want to focus on the negative of addictions. We want to focus on how these addictions can actually help you go through a healing crisis where you start to feel so empowered because you have had the experience that, wow, my body did this without a particular drug or without, outside interferences. So that's the main point of this, that just about anybody, as long as you don't take the body to a point of, deadly harm, but we're talking about just about anybody, as long as you apply your will and you have a higher consciousness about what you really want. And another point that I want to reiterate that we talked about last week is when you are focused on your purpose, then you have less connection to addictions. Addictions actually keep you away from living your life and from being in your purpose. It distracts you. It keeps you away from being fully present to the physical sensations in your body that allows you to use your senses, your five senses, and then ultimately your sixth sense, which is your third eye, which allows you to see things that maybe you wouldn't normally see if you're addicted to certain substances. And for us, these substances don't have to just be food, alcohol, or cigarettes or drugs. They can also be emotional addictions. Some people are addicted to being sad. Some people are addicted to fighting. I had that addiction. And, there's all kinds of addictions. It doesn't matter how evolved you are. Our DNA, one of the things we talked about last week was, the DNA dysfunctions can actually allow us to stay in a pattern of addictions if we're not paying attention to the direction that the disease is pointing us to. So that is the main essence of what we want to share with anyone who's interested in being more of a sovereign being in their own life and responsible. So, anything else you want to recap?
No, just that I guess a person could even be addicted to trying to be too nice all the time.
Absolutely.
Which could become a distraction in their own life because it takes them away from themselves.
Yeah. And all our 8 principles really covers a lot of ground, and it helps you on many, many different levels. There's a lot of people in the spiritual arena who aren't free of addictions. None of us are, or probably will be as long as we're on the planet, completely void of some kind of attachment to something. All we can do is our best to maintain some kind of balance about what we've been given as a purpose. And when we talk about addictions and dysfunctions and how they can distract you from your purpose, it also can keep you in a perpetual state of dis-ease. And what we're talking about here is the healing healer. And that could be all of us. It's just not a healer that works on other people or knows a lot about, energy and those kinds of things. We are actually healers in our own lives. Hippocrates says, physician, heal thyself. And so we are a physician for our own bodies if we just accept responsibility for this house that we live in. I have a first question for Mark. Okay, he's going to talk about tonight our first principle, which is about food and nutrients, good foods, and how supportive foods can be and unsupportive foods can affect us. So this is one of the first principles that we're going to be discussing. And my question to you, Mark, is, let me rethink what my question is, okay? How important do you think this particular principle is
Okay.
about foods?
This first principle of not harming yourself by choosing the wrong fuels to build your body, I would rate it between very important and life and death important, depending on where you are. Now, there is a very small minority of people where it's not as important, and these would be the few people that are embracing in a very big way the other 7 principles of health. And to them, it's less important. Think of it as a grade point average. You're trying to maintain a high grade point average in school, and you're weak in one subject. You get a C in one subject, but you're straight A's in all the other subjects. So you can afford that C and still maintain a high grade point average. Well, the 8 principles of health are similar to that. And the great majority of people, though, don't fit into that category where they're fully experiencing and embracing the other 7 principles. They're usually weak in all of them. So for that reason, the nutrition that you choose, the construction materials that you choose to build your body are of the utmost importance. And sometimes it can be a matter of life and death. You can be to a point where if you don't make a change in that within a few weeks, you could be dead. And I've seen miraculous recoveries, and I've seen it with Sage in our early beginnings. This was our motivation to do this. We went on a 30-day trial period. She had 4 very serious diseases then that were incurable by medical standards, and within a 30-day period of embracing primarily this single principle, she was symptom-free of those and continued.
Well, there were other principles.
Yeah, but but this was probably the primary one during that 30-day period where we saw significant changes. So you just think of think of it again, like I said before, as construction materials. I spent a lot of time building cabinets as a cabinet maker. And if I didn't have good quality materials, I knew that it was impossible to build a good quality product. A carpenter's the same way. With poor construction materials, with rotted lumber and warped plywood and bad shingles for the roof and cheap inferior products, he can only build a poor product that will not stand the test of time. It's the same way with the choice. It's simply a matter of making correct choices. Make the correct choices for the higher quality construction materials to put into your body, and it will result in a higher quality body at a cellular level. It's a very simple principle to me, and it's a very easy dot to connect.
What do you think are the biggest influence in people's lives around food choices?
Well, first, there's the lemming influence, the lemmings running off the cliff. It's just
So what?
Lemmings. There's little creatures that if one runs off the cliff, they all run off the cliff. That's the influence.
Some people might not know about
Yeah, okay. That's just basically sheep walking and doing what everyone else is doing and not giving it any thought. That's a big influence. Do what your parents did, do what your friends do, and hope for the best. Probably the biggest influence is the billions of dollars of false propaganda that the beverage companies and the fast food companies and the meat and dairy industry and the processed food industry put into trying to convince you that you can put this chemical garbage into your body that's completely foreign to anything natural and your physiological makeup of your body, and think it's okay. In the same way that cigarette companies so often try to make it look cool and sexy to smoke, and a thinking person looks at that as being completely absurd. The same thing is happening. Every other commercial on TV probably is about this food and that food. 99% of the advertisements are about foods that are poor choices. So that's a huge influence on the way people eat without them recognizing it. And they're even reinforced somewhat in school with the basic 4 food groups and what they have in the school cafeterias. So everywhere you go, everywhere you turn, you see mainstream people doing this. You see people of every level of station, level of life eating this way. And basically, for the most part, the great majority of people on a daily basis per meal are making very poor choices with what they decide to build their bodies with.
Do you think that that has anything to do with addictions?
Oh, absolutely. It's these foods are designed, like I said before, a lot of energy goes into coming up with formulas as to the ratio between the salts and the fats and the taste enhancing products similar to monosodium glutamate to create this craving. And then in turn, this craving creates the addiction. The addiction becomes very real. You just try to, if you've been living, making poor food choices all your life, and then you try to make perfectly correct food choices, there will be a short period of time where you will feel literal withdrawal symptoms from these foods. You'll get headaches. You'll be very symptomatic. You'll eliminate. You could, feel very poorly for a few days. But the end result, the reward, is so well worth it. In the same way, breaking a serious addiction, like a drug addiction, is so well worth the effort into breaking that addiction.
Well, I know when I went through my 30-day process of high enzyme diet, I was, like I said, I had previous sugar addictions, and I had a lot of allergies that, probably stemmed from some of those things. And for the first 8 days, I drained profusely, And to a lot of people, they might think, oh my goodness, I'm getting worse. But I knew that I was eliminating all those toxins that I had taken on over the years from from the sugar addictions that I had. And after understanding the reality of the body being the last messenger, because I was addicted to sugar, what I was really asking for on a higher level was more self-nurturing, more love from myself in my own life, apart from looking for it outside of myself. So once you start to clear out and clean up the addictions, you become more awakened and aware to what you're really doing these things for. And once you start to understand what you're creating, you start to connect to what you really need in your body. So you think that between the TV commercials, I know in the airports and everywhere you look, lots of people it's all about food. So you feel that it's more of the processed packaged foods that's more appealing to people and more influential in their consciousness about, I've got to have that, or
Well, it's a lack of poise, for one. They want what's fast and easy. And then you combine fast and easy with something that's very intelligently designed to create cravings, and you're hooked. It's tough. The very first step to creating a healthy lifestyle is develop some poise, where you can think about the decisions you're making, where you can put a little effort into your meals for the week, what you're going to eat, where you can read a label before you put it in your. It amazes me that people just put anything in their bodies without reading. They can be anywhere and they're offered something by who knows who, and they just eat it without any awareness of what's in it. What are the ingredients? Are there 100 ingredients in this? Are 10 of these 100 ingredients harmful chemicals? Are they, yeah, the answer to your question is just that. That's very important in terms of impacting us, in terms of creating addictions, and we need poise to address that.
There's so many conflictual ideas out there about what to eat. What would you recommend in terms of a person getting started with shifting their consciousness from these addictive foods that when you were speaking about, the commercials and all of that, I also know that a lot of these packaged foods actually have chemicals and preservatives and products in them to make you want more and continue to eat more. So with that said, where would you suggest a person get started, or how they should get started?
Well, to be perfectly honest, it can be extremely overwhelming if you want to approach this from an intellectual approach. The reason is there's over 100 different types of diet, and they all have conflicting views. Birch Brenner, microbiotic, Mediterranean, high fat, high carbohydrate, low carbohydrate, different types of vegetarian diets, fruitarian diet. There's so many different types of diet, and each one will cite different scientific studies to defend, and they can use different statistics and different, intelligent arguments to support those different types of diets. So if you just want to start reading and sifting through it, you're going to find yourself reading for a few years before you can even get a footing in which sense of direction you want to go. So basically, to me, that's a very backward approach. And then to me, you'll never really know for sure if you've made the right decision. What Sage and I highly recommend is to get in touch with your gut, your instinct, your intuition, to get still, to still your mind, and to approach it like this. Animals instinctively know exactly what they are. They know if they're omnivores or carnivores or herbivores or that type of boar that eats only dead things like vultures. Humans don't. We've become so busy and so preoccupied and so domesticated and so distracted that we have lost touch with our instincts. And to try to get a little bit of that back, you got to get still. You got to get reconnected with nature. You got to use your common sense, and you got to observe nature. I place a high priority on common sense versus intellectuality. There are some things you just want to approach from a common sense level versus an intellectual level. Now, I wouldn't want to send somebody to the moon in a rocket built by somebody that only had common sense. I'll take intellectual type mindset there. But for something like this, your health, your life, being, emotions, living, I'll take a common sense approach any day. So when you start to get away from that intellectual approach and you start to get still and observe nature, there's some very obvious and quick discoveries that you make. We are a part of nature. We're of the earth. We're connected to the animals. And first, the primary two ways of looking at ourselves are, did we get here through evolution or through some type of creation? If you take the creation perspective, the religious perspective, one of the two dominant views, the original food was vegetation, bearing seed, all types of plants, seeds, fruits, things like this. And in a Garden of Eden setting, it would have all been raw. If you take the evolutionary perspective, you realize that fire is a fairly recent discovery, that in the millions and millions of years we were evolving into who we are now. That I've read in Africa, it's only been the last 50,000 years that the discovery of fire has been available to man. So for so many years before the invention of fire, we obviously had a raw food diet. You observe every insect, every species of animal, and you find the same thing. They all thrive on a specific type of diet that their bodies are physiologically adapted to. Again, being either carnivores, omnivores, or herbivores. Now, most humans eat like a carnivore, and it's a very quick deduction from observing nature that we are not carnivores. You just look at the anatomical aspect of a human being, and we don't have the long snouts to protect us from tearing the flesh of the animal that we're eating, or we don't have the sharp teeth. We don't have the heavy fur. We're soft, squishy creatures compared to these carnivores. We have the long digestive tracts, which means that the meat putrefies in us versus the short digestive tract of the carnivore. We have we don't have the acidic saliva. We have an alkaline saliva. We don't have the strong digestive juices. The hydrochloric acid of the carnivore is 20 times more powerful than humans. So if we observe nature, we will find a few creatures that we're very similar to in terms of our tooth structure, our face structure, the flat face, the opposable thumb, the agility in the hands, the upright posture, and the digestive enzymes that we have, and that would be the chimpanzee or the gorilla. Backing up just a step, most people eat like the domesticated pig, not the wild pig, but the domesticated pig, because the domesticated pig eats absolutely anything in large quantity, and that's basically the diet of the average Westerner anyway. But the animal we most closely resemble would be the chimpanzee or the gorilla, and the gorilla's diet is strictly raw fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, and the chimpanzee's diet is exactly the same, except the occasional amount of raw meat, and that is probably more of a territorial thing than a physiological thing. So by making those common sense observations, we can pretty much conclude that if it's natural, growing in nature as it was provided for us, either through a creator or through the evolutionary process, it's probably going to be hard to improve on that by cooking it to death or processing it to death or destroying the nutrition in it and putting it in a box with flavor enhancers and all this. It's a pretty good bet you're in the right direction if you're observing nature and trying to, do the same thing. And it tells you too, if you're sitting next to a mango tree and a mango drop next to you, sweet, delicious mango, or and you have a bunny run up to you, what's your choice going to be? What's your gut feeling? Do you want to race after that bunny and tear its flesh apart with your teeth and start eating it, or do you want to take that mango and peel it and eat that sweet mango?
Well, it depends on how much meat you've been eating.
Yeah.
Well, as a medical intuitive and having worked with people who have been in healing crisis and having physiological ailments, when a lot of these things have been from addictions and the poor food choices, and which created other things in their lives, as well as environmental things. But when you talk about common sense, you'll take common sense any day over, having to read a lot of intellectual stuff and observing nature.
Not if I'm flying on a rocket to the moon. I
Okay.
draw my line there.
Okay, you're allowed. But what I've observed in working with some of these people, and even people I haven't worked with, when you get to a certain point in your dysfunctions and addictions, you lose your common sense. You're not as available to what Mark is calling common sense. It could be gut instinct, intuition, what your body is saying to you, what your consciousness is trying to share with you. So what I always suggest to the people who have, the vibrations have lowered and it's a little bit more difficult to even know what makes sense. A lot of people don't even know what makes sense anymore because there's so many things out there that they feel, especially in a grocery store, well, if it's a grocery store, it should be okay for you. And even looking at natural things, it says natural on the box. And, you talk a little bit about the natural process.
Natural means almost nothing. There's no standards to be held to when you use the word natural as an ingredient. Just ignore that. Organic means something, but the word natural means nothing on ingredient. There's way too much leeway.
Yeah, but I guess it depends on which country you're in about natural. But I just wanted to touch on that good common sense thing, is that when you have addictions, you're less connected to your good common sense. And what I suggest that Mark was talking about, observe nature, even when you're at that point where you're not in touch with your senses, if you get in nature and just allow yourself to put your feet in the grass or in the dirt, or spend some time in the fresh air or the water, it helps to reconnect you back in the quickest way than even reading books. and talking to people and trying to figure it all out. At least that's a starting point to get you reconnected. My next question for you is, you've referred to, like fruits, vegetables, like a raw food diet the last time we spoke and a little bit tonight. Why do you think raw food is superior to cooked food?
Okay, good question. We are the only species, other than domesticated animals, that eats any type of cooked food. It's a learned behavior and a learned taste. Every food has a perfect ratio of vitamins, minerals, hormones, enzymes, protein to make it perfect for our bodies to assimilate. We start to disturb that perfect balance when we cook it. Enzymes are destroyed, all the life components are destroyed, the oxygen, the photochemicals, the bioelectric energy, and other stuff that we don't even know about yet. 50 years, we're in the infant stage of nutrition. 50 years from now, we'll know so much more, and we'll see how much more of the food we're destroying. But even the three basic components that most everybody knows about, the vitamins, the minerals, and the protein, the vitamins are altered. There are not as many there when you're done cooking. The minerals are affected, and the proteins are greatly affected. We don't really use the protein. We use the amino acids that make up the protein. Amino acids are held together by peptide bonds. And just think of it like a cluster of marbles held together either with epoxy glue or a water-soluble glue. The body has to break every one of these amino acids down of every protein and reassemble it and use it. So when you cook it, these peptide bonds change from a very water-soluble, easy-to-break apart glue to an epoxy-type glue where it can't get all of them apart. And that becomes very difficult to digest. So it becomes very burdensome on the body. And this is where a lot of diseases come in. There's a lot of diseases that are a result of high protein intakes. Uric acid is a side effect. Your joints, your arthritis. There's so many intestinal problems that come from overprotein consumption. So there's a superiority of raw food in that regard, in that you're not destroying it. Again, common sense. Let's get away from the intellectual aspect of it. Let's take the common sense approach. You've got an apple. It falls right off the tree, and you eat it. Then you take an apple and you cook it in the oven for 2 hours till it's burnt to a crisp. Common sense tells you that the apple that just fell from the tree is going to be more nutritious for you. I don't think anyone would argue that that's more nutritious than a pile of ashes. Well, it's like a
sliding scale.
A sliding scale. Thank you. It's like yes, it's like a sliding scale. You got the apple is a 10 and the burnt ashes are a 0. And the degree and extent to which you cook it, between burnt to ashes and completely raw, is a degree and extent to which you alter it to make it less nutritious. Now, there are some foods that you should cook, but what these are is they're just not optimal foods. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but a food that you have to cook is not the ideal food. It can still be a healthy food. You have to cook beans, and you have to cook rice, and you have to cook heavy starches.
Whole foods.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to cook a lot of these, and it just means it takes it out of the perfect, super easy to digest without hardly any residue of bad effects to the body to something slightly more complex to the body with a little more residual toxicity in it that the body has to deal with. But it can still be a big part of a good diet. But the optimum way to eat is a very high percentage of raw foods. Now, if you think if that doesn't quite sink in, let's take another common sense approach. Every fruit or vegetable that you eat has seeds. It comes from seeds. It's a living thing. It's alive. There's life force in it. Whether you're eating a cucumber, tomato, watermelon, a cantaloupe, or mango, you spit the seed out on the ground, and if it falls into fertile soil, it's going to grow. So theoretically, with one seed, one tomato seed or one cucumber seed, with enough time, then the seeds from that fruit that it bears, and then the seeds from those fruit, you could fill the whole earth with that plant. That's a lot of life force. That's a lot of life potential. Whereas if you take that same fruit or vegetable or nut or seed and you cook it, then it becomes impossible to grow anything with that. It's lost its life force. And there's a whole long discussion, probably on more of a level of quantum physics, that you could have about vibration of life force, living things versus inanimate things, living matter versus inanimate matter, and how that living things vibrate at a higher level and they attract and have a better symbiotic relationship in your body with, yes, for other living matter. Even human beings could vibrate at different levels. A murderer compared to a person whose consciousness is toward doing good. But that's a long subject, but it's an intellectual subject, but approaching it from a common sense approach is just living food. Live foods have life in them, raw foods have life in them, and cooked foods are dead. Last week we talked about the two things to put on your refrigerator. First, do no harm to your body, and then the Hippocrates, the second one, about sins don't come upon us out of the blue. We commit sins against nature daily. When enough have accumulated, then illness visits us. That's the second thing. The third thing I would put on my refrigerator is raw foods have life, dead cooked foods are dead. It's a simple principle that to me appealed to me, and I embraced very quickly. And it doesn't mean you have to have a 100% raw diet, but Sage and I think it's very possible for the average person with all the addictions they have to make some changes and to make conscious choices. And within a short period of time, if they do it right, they'll enjoy a 70% raw diet more than they enjoy the addictive way of eating now, which, because the cooked foods tend to create these cravings and this lack of satisfaction that lasts, whereas a living diet gives you a more satisfied and a lighter feeling, through every meal.
Well, just last week you talked about your food addictions and how you were so addicted to meat and not being able to control the quantity, the amount of foods that you would eat at one sitting. And I'd have to say, from living with him,
no, let's not tell secrets.
that eating a higher raw food, diet or high enzyme actually helps to control that type of addiction or sensation that normally isn't controlled, because as I think Mark said it last week about what we call the appetite switch that actually tells your body I've had enough. Whereas if I sat down and ate a really big bag of chips, I started out eating 5 or 10, or I couldn't stop. I'd have to keep eating and eating because there was not enough nutrients. Mm-hmm. My body would be craving, like, where are the nutrients? Where are the minerals? Where are the vitamins? But when you sit down and you eat a big mango, it's like you just can't eat anymore, or you can only eat a small amount of another one. So your body, when it knows it's getting the sufficient amount of nutrients and life force, it will cut you off. You don't have to tell your head, okay, it's time to stop eating these chips or these donuts, or there's no desire.
Your body knows when it's done. It's that simple. It gets the message from somewhere that you're done. That's enough.
Yeah, and so we prepare our meals in a way that we enjoy what we eat. We, we're satisfied with the type of meals that we have. And it actually, for somebody that has been an addictive eater like Mark, I have to say you really enjoy your
I love the way I eat now so much more than when I had the cravings and the addictions to battle. I mean, I love meat, I love it, but I hate the dissatisfied feeling I get of going from zero to bloated and heavy and disgusted feeling by eating too much and then waiting to just repeat that cycle again. I'd like to say one more thing about the raw food. There are a lot of scientific people and a lot of nutritionists and a lot of very intelligent people that will very, very strongly and passionately argue against a food too high in raw. But to me, the proof is in the pudding. I would rather look at results than look at scientific jargon. those people that are fighting hard to promote more conventional types of eating have not experienced what Sage and I have experienced. We've been on both ends of it. We've lived one way for a lot of years and another way for a lot of years. And I know a lot of other people. This puts us in touch with other people who have had similar experiences. And if you have experienced a predominantly raw food diet for an extended period of time, you know there are hundreds of improvements you can point to in the way that you feel and the less symptoms you have, versus somebody who's intellectually arguing it but who has no experience with it. Where would you rather take your advice from? A guy teaching you how to lift weights that's never touched a weight in his life and he's 200 pounds overweight, but he's telling you in a very intellectual way exactly what you should do, or some guy that's never even gone to college, but he's built like a brick house and he just seems to know what he's doing, and you look at him and you see the proof, you see the results, and it's in his life. I would take my advice from that person myself. The proof is in the pudding. So it's an intellectual argument from people that don't have the experience on the side that Sage and I have it.
Or mostly theory,
Yeah.
if you haven't had the experience.
Right.
One of the reasons, and we're speaking about raw foods, one of the things that creates life force in us are enzymes. And the only place that you can find enzymes are in fresh and raw fruits, vegetables, seeds, and nuts. And the other place is enzyme capsules. So enzymes are a life force, and without sufficient amount of enzymes, we die. You know, the cells start to degenerate. And that's one of the reasons we promote and also use for ourselves a higher enzyme lifestyle. Now, when you have addictions and you're transitioning, we're also talking about whole foods as well. We include whole foods in our life that are cooked whole foods. You can also just increase your raw food level. You don't have to be 100% raw. You don't even have to be 80% when you're coming from this kind of lifestyle. You will notice a significant change when you start to get rid of the addictive, toxic, chemical-laden foods and replace it with whole foods and high enzyme foods. You'll notice a big difference too in how you feel, how you think, and your body. Was there anything else you wanted to say about
Just
that?
from personal experience, everybody's a little different in what they can get away with in the different
Exactly.
principles of health. Myself, because of some of the sins I've committed during my youth,
Or sins.
sins against nature, sins against the principles
You mean
of how we
acts
should
against?
live. Yes, acts against. I'm talking Hippocrates here, not
Okay, I think
not
you were
religious sin.
Okay.
I can't get away with as much as some people. If I dip much below 70% raw, I start to feel very symptomatic. Right now I'm 60. I've had a few bad breaks of bones, and I have zero arthritis, zero aches and pains. I get up in the morning without any need for coffee, and I don't need any stimulants, and I feel pretty good, and I don't get sick much. If I start eating conventional mainstream, within a couple weeks, I immediately feel worse the second day. Now I'm talking eating conventional hamburgers, hot dogs, and just poorly and mostly cooked food. Within 2 weeks, I would feel like I was 85, I think. It would be impossible for me to get away with it. Now, somebody that's led a different life and has a different constitution, they could get away with more than me. But I'm able to live, very healthy just by simply maintaining a 70% raw balance. Now, at times, if I run into a problem, I may want to boost that up because I find myself able to heal so much quicker from things when I take that up a notch. So I vary it, between 70 to 100, depending on if I have an ailment that I need to get over. But I try not to dip below 70 because my body becomes very symptomatic with little aches and pains. And when you're used to a lifetime of not having that, that feels especially bad. You can numb yourself through an addictive lifestyle. You numb yourself to accepting that type of a feeling. But if you're not used to it, it's a terrible feeling. The aches and pains in the morning and the terrible sluggishness and the lethargy and needing to kickstart yourself with a cup of coffee. That's just a bad feeling if you've never had to feel that way. That's it.
You sure that's it?
I'm sure.
What, what's the,
Oh, we were going to talk about a sliding scale.
no, you were.
Yeah, I was going to. Yeah.
You slid in the wrong
Yeah,
direction. Okay.
yeah.
You want to talk about
Yeah,
sliding
yeah, I
scale?
do. I like this. I like simple things. I like principles versus facts. One principle sometimes can embrace 1,000 facts. It's so much easier to remember one principle versus 1,000 facts. And people don't have to study a lot. You don't have to read a lot of books. You just need a very simple principle in terms of guiding you about what are good decisions to eat and what are bad decisions to eat. Every single time you put something in your mouth, so 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day when you're eating, depending on who you are and your habits, you're making a choice to either destroy your health or build your health, build and maintain it. So I like to look at it in terms of a sliding scale, 10 being raw and natural as it appears in nature. So that would be any fruit, nut, seed, vegetable that you can eat raw. You know, the fruit, there's a lot of fruit you can eat raw, peppers, tomatoes, cucumbers, avocado, yeah. And then on the other, these are 10s. They build health, they maintain health. The foods that absolutely destroy health the quickest would be like hard liquor. These would put down on the 1 scale. They'd be hard liquor. They would be any processed ingredient in the supermarket with more than any processed food, packaged food with more than 30 ingredients. It would be pastries you buy not from the bakery but in the supermarket with their additives. It would be fast food. It would be factory farm raised meat, which in the Western culture is probably responsible for 95% of all meat. Maybe we'll get into that somewhere else, but it's a terrible source for protein, but the most common source for protein. So these are just Pop-Tarts. These are some common sense things that mostly everybody knows.
Pop-Tarts?
No, these are down on the, yes, you can eat anything, but they're down on the number 1. So if you're trying to maintain a passing grade or a high point grade average, you don't want to include hardly any of these things. Sodas, these are down in the 1. So what would be moving from 10 to 9, let's say up in the 10s, also raw fermented foods, like if you make your own sauerkraut or your own, even if you have access to raw milk, which we do, and you ferment it by making it into kefir or yogurt, small amounts of that to me would fall into the 10. A 9 would be something that's still raw but maybe dehydrated. You've changed it a little bit, but it's still a very good food. It's a living food with its enzymes intact and everything else in a proper balance. You've taken the water out of it is all. But when you do that, it's no longer a 10. You're still in the 9. You've got a great grade point average. Now, slipping down to 8 to me would be foods that you have to lightly steam, like broccoli, cauliflower. Now, the foods you have to cook a little more, cook pretty heavily, would be beans and rice and just foods you have to cook for at least 45 minutes. Potatoes. Now we're down to a 7. A 7 still gives you pretty good grade. If you can make most of your food choices between a 7 and a 10, you are really doing well. You're really doing well in this principle of health. But then as you start to dip more and more into the 6s, the 5s, the 4s, once you're eating really well and you have a consciousness, you almost never dip down into the 1s. Almost never. Because you don't have a craving for it. Those are the 1s and the 2s and the 3s, they're craving foods, they're addiction foods. They're foods you eat when you're not in touch with your common sense and your healthy body. You're in touch with your needs and being controlled. So let's take
addictions.
Your addictions, yeah. Let's take an apple. An apple falling off a tree is a 10. And your mother makes an apple pie the old-fashioned way, and she uses honey. You're down to a 5, which is still not the worst thing in the world. A few 5s, and you can still have a very good grade point average. Then you take that and you go to McDonald's and it's in a fried apple dessert, or it's a Pop-Tart in a grocery store with all these chemical additives. Now you're down to a 1. You take a potato's down to a 7 just starting out. You cook it in coconut oil, which is the best oil to fry in. If you're ever going to fry, you should use coconut oil. And so it moves from a 7 to a 5. And then you go to McDonald's and have their French fries, which probably genetically modified to begin with, in addition to the using cheap oils and then a heated oil all day long, you're down to a 1. So the same food can range greatly depending on how you eat it. So with that mindset, after you run that through your mind a few times, it's pretty easy to take any food and put it on that chart somewhere and figure, okay, is this a good, intelligent decision? Does this support me? Is this a decision for the highest good of my body? Or is this a decision based on addiction and craving and not having poise?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know you could talk about the sliding scale for a while. But I have one more question for you, but also I don't know if there's anybody out there who has any questions that they might want to ask at this time, because we're getting close to ending. And if there is a question out there at this point, we would love to address it. And for those of you who didn't get a chance to hop on live and you end up catching this on YouTube, please send us your questions to the Facebook page, and I'll talk about that at the end. So let me see, I can't see. Can you see if
what am I looking for?
Any questions out there?
Where would they be?
What is this down here? I can't see
No,
that.
I don't see a question.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you this last question before we come to a close. And what principles would you suggest to make better food choices?
Well, I would start with getting the worst things out of your life. If you drink a lot,
what would you consider worst things?
That's what I'm getting
Okay.
at. First off, beverage. I was 17 when I quit drinking soda because I knew it was a habit that I would want to quit one day. And I didn't know anything about health, but I knew it was unhealthy. And I knew one day that I was going to be more concerned about my health. So at 17, I drank sodas. I haven't had another one since. So that's 43 years I haven't had a soda. So sodas, take the first month to get sodas and strong alcohol out of your life. And the second month, maybe
Strong
tobacco.
alcohol? So
Yeah,
weak
vodka.
alcohol?
Well, I would wait. If we're getting the worst things out of your life first, yeah, you could hold off on the beer and the wine in moderation. There's a big difference. Cigarettes. I just don't see how you can really have a consciousness toward health and be smoking. It's so counterproductive to good health.
But that is a process.
Yeah,
Too. Everything's
exactly.
a process when you're transitioning.
Yes, exactly. But that would be one of the first steps I would take to try to get that out of my life. And then you start getting the processed lunch meats. These are the number one. The hot dogs, the scrapple, the ham, the factory farm raised meat is terrible. But it's insult to injury when you start injecting it with nitrates and preservatives and additives and things like this. Then it just becomes unconscionable to eat. So start with those things. And then as you gradually are getting more and more things out of your diet, you're incorporating more and more good things in there. So you don't even have to worry about a 70% raw for quite some time. You're concentrating on getting whole foods. There's a lot of types of beans, rice, different types of rices, chickpeas, lentils. There's so many vegetarian dishes you can make, and that would be another step to switch if you're going to eat meat, at least make it
Organic.
organic meat or something, or wild. Maybe somebody that hunts wild meat. It's so much superior to factory farm raised meat. And so you cut back on your meat intake, cut back on your processed food and your chemicalized food and your fast food, and you just start substituting. They're just different choices. They're not hard choices, because once your taste buds come back into normalcy, then you start to crave these foods just as much. These other foods taste artificial. They're a letdown. They're like an illusion. Food is the greatest illusion that there is. You always go into a meal thinking you want this so bad, and then you feel a little heavy afterwards and not always as fully satisfied as you thought you would be. But that changes when you're eating healthier foods that work in a symbiotic relationship with your body. You get a more desired result in so many different levels.
So basically, to put it quite simply, one of the principles, the main principle that you need to look at without worrying about, I've got to get rid of this food or that food or the other food, is first do no harm. And when you start to acknowledge what you are eating, if it's chemical laden or preservative laden or overly processed, you just know it's not the most serving food for you. You don't have to understand, well, how many calories does it have, how many nutrients, does it have this vitamin B or that. You just know if anything is laden with chemicals, preservatives, overly processed, denatured, it's some of the things that you want to start to remove from your lifestyle, including, some of the other addictive things like the strong alcohol and cigarettes and certain drugs. And when you start to eliminate those things, you will start to open yourself up to a higher vibrational, life-giving lifestyle. So on that note, we're going to end tonight, and if you have any questions or want any more information about what we're doing, you can go to www.powerlivingretreat.com, and the Facebook page is Sage Gia, spiritual and medical intuitive Q&A forum. You can leave the questions, and it has all of our other social media information on there as well. And next week, the next time we meet, we will talk about the principle number 2, and that will be...
It's up to you.
What will that be?
Okay, let's see.
It's in our book. What's the next principle? Well, he has said we don't have much time.
No, I forget the chronological order. But,
okay. Well, for you to be in touch with the next talk on this, you can check out the Power Living Retreat. We'll post the next upcoming talk that we'll give on whole life healing. So have a great night. Enjoy your life. Treat yourself well. And you are what you eat.
Right. And what you eat today walks and talks tomorrow. And if you can't pronounce it, don't eat it.
Ciao.